If nobody knew what you found, would you still do the right thing? Olivia Carter stared at the black leather bag lying beside a rain-soaked bench and felt her heart begin to race. The small city park was nearly empty on that cold afternoon. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a steady rain fell across the sidewalks and streets. Olivia had just finished a long shift at a grocery store and was walking home to the small apartment she shared with her 8-year-old son, Mason. Her shoes were wet. Her coat offered little protection from the weather, and her mind was filled with the same worries that followed her every day. Rent was due in less than a week. The electricity bill sat unopened on the kitchen table. Mason needed new shoes for school. Every dollar mattered. At first, she assumed the bag belonged to someone nearby. She looked around, expecting to see a person searching frantically. But nobody appeared. The park remained quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against tree branches. Curious, Olivia carefully picked up the bag and looked inside. The moment she opened it, she froze. Bundles of cash filled the interior. Her breath caught in her throat. She quickly closed the zipper and glanced around again. This time her pulse felt even faster. There had to be tens of thousands of dollars inside. Maybe more. For several long seconds, she simply stood there holding the bag while rain dripped from her hair. Her thoughts moved in every direction at once. The money could solve nearly every problem she faced. She could pay rent months in advance. She could replace the old refrigerator that barely worked. She could finally stop worrying every time Mason needed something unexpected. Nobody had seen her pick up the bag. Nobody knew it was in her hands. Yet even as those thoughts appeared, another thought felt stronger. The money belonged to someone. Somewhere, a person was probably terrified after realizing it was missing. Olivia slowly sat down on the bench and stared at the bag resting beside her. The temptation was real. She would never deny that. Honest people were not honest because doing the right thing was easy. They were honest because they made the right choice when it was difficult. Several yards away, a black luxury vehicle sat parked along the street. Inside, billionaire entrepreneur Ethan Walker waited while his driver handled a phone call. Through the rain-covered window, Ethan happened to notice the woman sitting alone on the bench. At first, he paid little attention. Then he saw her open the bag. He noticed her reaction immediately. Even from a distance, he could tell she had discovered something important. Curious, he continued watching. Olivia remained seated for nearly a minute. Then she stood, tightened her grip on the bag, and began walking with purpose toward the police station 3 blocks away. Ethan frowned slightly, intrigued. Most people would not have made a decision that quickly. He watched her disappear into the rain, unaware that a simple choice made by a struggling single mother had just captured his attention in a way no business deal ever could. The police station was warm compared to the cold rain outside, but Olivia Carter still felt a chill as she stepped through the front doors carrying the black leather bag. Water dripped from her coat onto the floor while several people glanced in her direction. For a brief moment, she wondered if she was making a mistake. Not because returning the money was wrong, but because the reality of her situation made the decision feel almost painful. $50,000 could have changed everything. Yet deep down, she already knew she could never keep it. A police officer greeted her at the front desk and asked if she needed assistance. Olivia carefully placed the bag on the counter and explained where she had found it. When the officer opened the zipper and saw the contents, his eyebrows immediately rose. Another officer was called over. Within minutes, they began documenting the discovery and asking questions. Olivia answered honestly, providing every detail she could remember. The officers thanked her repeatedly. One of them even remarked that many people would not have returned such a large amount of money. Olivia simply smiled politely. She did not feel extraordinary. She felt relieved. The temptation that had weighed on her shoulders since finding the bag was finally gone. Outside, parked across the street, Ethan Walker remained in his vehicle. He watched the entire scene unfold through the rain-covered windows. The longer he observed, the more curious he became. In his world, money often revealed people's true priorities. He had spent years negotiating contracts, evaluating executives, and making decisions involving millions of dollars. Yet something about this struggling woman returning $50,000 felt far more impressive than any business achievement he had witnessed recently. After leaving the station, Olivia began the long walk home. She stopped at a grocery store along the way and carefully compared prices while shopping for dinner. Ethan found himself following at a distance, not out of suspicion, but because he wanted to understand who she really was. What he saw surprised him. She counted every dollar before making purchases. She returned one item to the shelf after realizing it would push her budget too high. She chose practical necessities instead of anything extra. Nothing about her behavior suggested someone secretly holding on to a fortune. Eventually, Olivia arrived at a modest apartment building located above a small bakery on Maple Street. Ethan remained parked across the road and watched her disappear inside. A few minutes later, he noticed something through a second-floor window. A young boy ran toward her the moment she entered. Olivia immediately smiled, knelt down, and embraced him. Even from a distance, Ethan could recognize the affection between mother and son. Inside the apartment, Mason excitedly told his mother about a school project while she prepared a simple dinner. The evening felt ordinary. Yet that ordinariness fascinated Ethan. The woman who had returned $50,000 was not wealthy. She was not comfortable. She was not protected from hardship. If anything, she seemed to need the money more than most people would. And yet she gave it back without hesitation. Later that night, after Mason had gone to bed, Olivia sat alone at the kitchen table reviewing bills. The numbers did not magically improve. The rent was still due. The expenses remained real. But despite everything, she felt peace. She had done the right thing. Across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse apartment looking out over the city lights. For the first time in many months, he could not stop thinking about a stranger. And he had a feeling their story was only beginning. The next morning, Olivia Carter woke before sunrise and quietly prepared breakfast while Mason still slept. The small apartment above the bakery felt peaceful at that hour, but her mind was already focused on the responsibilities waiting for her. She packed Mason's lunch, reviewed the family budget one more time, and headed to work after walking him to school. Life moved forward exactly as it always had. The discovery of the money seemed almost unreal now, like something that had happened to another person. Yet across the city, Ethan Walker found himself thinking about it constantly. During meetings, his attention drifted back to the image of Olivia standing at the police station counter. During lunch, he remembered the modest apartment and the way Mason had run into his mother's arms. By evening, curiosity had become impossible to ignore. Ethan instructed a trusted assistant to gather publicly available information about Olivia Carter. He expected to find something unusual. Instead, what he found was remarkably ordinary. Olivia had worked steadily for years. Her employment history showed reliability rather than ambition. She moved from one job to another whenever better opportunities appeared, always maintaining positive references. There were no scandals, no lawsuits, no extraordinary achievements. She simply worked, paid bills, and raised her son. The more Ethan learned, the more intrigued he became. Several days later, he happened to pass the neighborhood bakery while attending a nearby meeting. Acting on impulse, he entered the small shop and ordered coffee. The aroma of fresh bread filled the room. Customers chatted quietly while employees worked behind the counter. Through a doorway near the back, Ethan noticed Olivia carrying supplies upstairs toward her apartment. She did not see him. What caught his attention was not the task itself, but the expression on her face. Even while carrying heavy boxes after what was clearly a long day, she remained polite and cheerful toward everyone she encountered. One elderly customer accidentally dropped a package near the entrance. Before anyone else reacted, Olivia immediately set down her boxes and helped gather the scattered items. The customer thanked her repeatedly. Olivia smiled and returned to her work without seeking recognition. Ethan watched the exchange carefully. It was a small moment. Yet he had spent enough time around people to know that character revealed itself most clearly during ordinary situations. Over the next week, he observed several similar moments. Olivia volunteered to help neighbors. She treated strangers with kindness. She remained patient even when inconvenienced. None of these actions were dramatic. That was precisely what made them meaningful. They were not performed for attention. They were simply part of who she was. Meanwhile, Olivia remained completely unaware that anyone was paying attention. Her focus stayed on Mason and the constant challenge of building a stable future. One evening, she attended a parent meeting at school and listened proudly as Mason's teacher described his progress. Another evening, she spent hours helping him complete a science project using recycled materials because purchasing expensive supplies was not an option. Through every challenge, she continued moving forward with quiet determination. Sitting alone in his office late one night, Ethan reviewed the information gathered about her and leaned back in his chair. Returning the money had impressed him, but now he was beginning to understand something more important. The honesty she demonstrated that rainy afternoon was not an isolated decision. It was the natural result of years spent living according to principles that never changed. And for the first time, Ethan began wondering whether someone like Olivia might deserve far more than admiration. She might deserve an opportunity. One Friday afternoon, Olivia Carter received an unexpected phone call while finishing her shift at the grocery store. At first, she assumed it was another reminder about a bill or an appointment she had forgotten. Instead, a polite voice informed her that a local community development organization was accepting applications for a new administrative position. One of her former supervisors had recommended her name. The opportunity offered better pay, regular hours, and benefits. Olivia thanked the caller and promised to submit an application. After ending the call, she stood silently for a moment. Opportunities like that did not appear often. Yet she quickly pushed her excitement aside and returned to work. There were customers waiting, shelves to organize, and responsibilities to finish before she could think about the future. Across town, Ethan Walker was attending a board meeting when he received an update from his assistant. The report contained nothing dramatic. In fact, that was exactly what caught his attention. Olivia's life seemed built from hundreds of small responsible decisions. She paid obligations before buying unnecessary things. She volunteered occasionally at Mason's school. She maintained positive relationships with coworkers and neighbors. Every new piece of information reinforced the same conclusion. Her honesty was not extraordinary behavior. It was simply consistent behavior. Several days later, Ethan happened to visit a community center that his foundation supported. The center hosted after-school programs for children, and local families often participated in weekend events. As he toured the facility, he unexpectedly noticed a familiar face. Olivia was there helping organize supplies for a children's reading program. She was not being paid. She was not receiving recognition. She was simply helping because assistance was needed. Ethan observed from a distance as she arranged books, greeted families, and encouraged children. Mason sat nearby working on homework while occasionally helping carry materials. The scene affected Ethan more than he expected. Most people revealed their priorities when nobody important was watching. Olivia appeared to be exactly the same person regardless of circumstance. Later that afternoon, Mason accidentally dropped a box of books while helping move supplies. Several books scattered across the floor. Before he could become embarrassed, Olivia knelt beside him and smiled. She quietly reassured him that mistakes happen to everyone. Together they gathered the books and finished the task. Ethan noticed how carefully she spoke to her son. There was patience in her voice, respect in her words, and encouragement in every interaction. The moment reminded him of something missing from many successful people he knew. Character could not be purchased. It had to be built over time. That evening, Ethan returned to his office carrying thoughts he could not easily dismiss. Looking out across the city skyline, he reflected on the countless individuals who had entered his professional world over the years. Many possessed impressive qualifications. Many possessed ambition. Yet very few possessed the combination of integrity, humility, and perseverance he continued seeing in Olivia Carter. For the first time, he stopped thinking about her as a stranger who had returned lost money. Instead, he began thinking about how someone with her character might thrive if given the right opportunity. Meanwhile, Olivia sat at her kitchen table completing the application for the administrative position. Mason worked beside her on a school assignment. The apartment remained modest. The bills still existed. The future remained uncertain. But as she carefully filled out each section, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Hope. She had no idea that elsewhere in the city, a billionaire was reaching a decision that would soon change both of their lives. The following week brought both excitement and uncertainty into Olivia Carter's life. She submitted her application to the Community Development Organization and tried not to think about it too much. Experience had taught her that hoping too strongly could sometimes lead to disappointment. Instead, she focused on the responsibilities directly in front of her. She worked her shifts at the grocery store, cared for Mason, and continued volunteering whenever she could spare the time. Yet despite her efforts to remain realistic, a small part of her allowed itself to imagine what life might look like if she secured a better position. One afternoon, While organizing inventory at work, Olivia received an email requesting an interview. Her heart skipped a beat. The organization wanted to meet with her the following week. She thanked the hiring coordinator and immediately shared the news with Mason later that evening. His excitement filled the apartment. He began talking about all the possibilities the moment she finished explaining. Olivia laughed and reminded him that she had not been offered the job yet. Still, seeing hope in her son's eyes made her realize how much this opportunity mattered. Across town, Ethan Walker sat in his office reviewing reports from several companies. Yet his attention repeatedly drifted toward another file resting on his desk. The folder contained information about Olivia gathered through publicly available sources, professional references, and observations he had personally made over recent weeks. What struck him most was how remarkably consistent every description seemed to be. Former supervisors described her as dependable. Neighbors described her as kind. Teachers praised her involvement in Mason's education. Coworkers spoke about her willingness to help others. There were no contradictions, no hidden surprises, no evidence that her honesty had been an isolated moment. It was simply who she was. Later that day, Ethan made a decision. Rather than merely admire Olivia's character from a distance, he wanted to create a genuine opportunity. Not a gift, not charity, an opportunity she could earn. He contacted the director of a new community outreach initiative funded by one of his companies. The program needed an administrative coordinator with strong organizational skills, empathy, and the ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds. As the director described the position, Ethan found himself thinking of Olivia almost immediately. Meanwhile, Olivia attended her interview at the Community Development Organization. The meeting went well. She answered questions honestly and spoke about her work experience, her volunteer activities, and her commitment to helping others. When the interview concluded, she felt cautiously optimistic. Yet she knew many qualified applicants were likely competing for the same position. 2 days later, another unexpected message arrived. This one came from Brooks Community Outreach, an organization she had never heard of before. The message invited her to interview for a newly created role that matched her experience surprisingly well. Olivia was puzzled. She had never submitted an application there. Assuming someone had recommended her, she accepted the invitation. That evening, while helping Mason with homework, she wondered where this second opportunity had come from. She could not possibly know that behind the scenes, a billionaire who first noticed her in the rain had quietly opened a door. Nor could she know that the most important conversation of her life was now drawing closer with every passing day. Olivia Carter arrived at the interview for Brooks Community Outreach carrying the same quiet determination that guided every important decision in her life. The office building was modern but welcoming, designed to serve local families and community programs rather than corporate clients. As she entered the lobby, she noticed photographs on the walls showing educational projects, food drives, mentorship initiatives, and neighborhood improvement efforts. Something about the organization's mission immediately resonated with her. These were the kinds of efforts she had always supported whenever she could. A receptionist greeted her warmly and escorted her to a conference room. During the interview, Olivia spoke honestly about her work history, her volunteer experience, and the challenges she had overcome while raising Mason alone. She never exaggerated her accomplishments. She never attempted to impress anyone with dramatic stories. Instead, she focused on what mattered most to her: responsibility, reliability, and helping people. The interview panel seemed genuinely interested in her answers. Several times they asked follow-up questions about difficult situations she had faced. Each time, Olivia responded with the same calm sincerity that had earned respect from everyone who knew her. When the meeting ended, she thanked the panel and left feeling surprisingly hopeful. 2 days later, her phone rang while she was helping Mason prepare dinner. The organization was offering her the position. For a moment, Olivia could barely speak. The salary was significantly higher than what she currently earned. The schedule was more stable. Benefits were included. There would be opportunities for professional growth. After ending the call, she sat quietly at the kitchen table while tears filled her eyes. Mason immediately knew something important had happened. When she shared the news, he threw his arms around her and celebrated as though they had won a championship. In many ways, that was exactly how it felt. The following weeks brought major changes. Olivia resigned from the grocery store and began her new role. From the beginning, She approached the position with gratitude and determination. She arrived early, learned quickly, and built strong relationships with coworkers and community members. Her supervisors quickly recognized her ability to solve problems, organize projects, and connect with people. Yet despite the positive changes, Olivia remained exactly the same person. She continued volunteering. She continued helping neighbors. She continued teaching Mason the values she believed mattered most. Across town, Ethan Walker received regular updates about the outreach initiative he funded. The reports repeatedly mentioned Olivia's performance. Managers praised her professionalism. Community partners appreciated her dedication. Families described her as approachable and trustworthy. Every update confirmed what Ethan had believed from the beginning. Character created opportunities that money alone never could. Several months later, Ethan scheduled a visit to the outreach center. Officially, he was reviewing program operations. Unofficially, he wanted to see for himself how Olivia was doing. When he arrived, he observed her coordinating a community event involving dozens of families. She moved confidently through the room, solving problems, answering questions, and encouraging volunteers. The woman who once sat alone on a rainy park bench had clearly found a place where her talents could flourish. As Ethan watched from across the room, he realized something else. Olivia still had no idea who he was or how closely their stories had become connected. She had earned every success through her own efforts. Soon, however, the truth about the day they first crossed paths would finally come into the open. And when that conversation happened, both of their lives would be changed in ways neither expected. 6 months passed faster than Olivia Carter could have imagined. What began as a new job gradually became a meaningful career. Brooks Community Outreach continued expanding its programs, and Olivia played an increasingly important role in that growth. Families trusted her. Volunteers respected her. Coworkers relied on her judgment. More importantly, she enjoyed the work. For the first time in years, she no longer felt trapped in a cycle of merely surviving. She was building something. The positive changes reached every corner of her life. Mason was thriving in school. The constant stress surrounding rent and overdue bills had largely disappeared. Their apartment still sat above the bakery on Maple Street, but it felt different now. The small space that once symbolized struggle increasingly felt like a place where new possibilities had begun. One afternoon, Olivia received an invitation to attend a leadership recognition event hosted by the organization. Several employees from various programs would be honored for their contributions to the community. She assumed she was simply attending as a participant and gave little thought to it. The event itself was scheduled for the following week at a conference center downtown. When the evening finally arrived, Olivia wore a simple navy dress and arrived feeling slightly out of place among executives, board members, donors, and community leaders. Yet she quickly focused on enjoying the event rather than worrying about appearances. The room filled with conversations, laughter, and stories about projects that had positively impacted local families. As the ceremony began, several awards were presented. Olivia applauded sincerely for every recipient. Then something unexpected happened. Her name appeared on the large screen at the front of the room. For a moment, she thought there must be some mistake. The host began describing an individual whose leadership, compassion, and integrity had transformed lives throughout the organization. As more details were shared, Olivia realized they were describing her. Shocked applause filled the room as she slowly stood. Her coworkers cheered enthusiastically while she made her way toward the stage. Waiting there was a man she recognized only from photographs and company materials. Ethan Walker. This was the first time they had ever formally met. Ethan greeted her warmly and presented the recognition award. The audience applauded again while photographers captured the moment. Yet as Olivia accepted the award, she noticed something unusual. Ethan seemed genuinely emotional. It was not the expression of a billionaire attending another corporate event. It felt personal somehow. After the ceremony concluded, Ethan approached her privately and asked whether she would be willing to join him for a brief conversation. Curious, Olivia agreed. They moved to a quiet conference room overlooking the city lights. For a moment, neither spoke. Ethan looked out the window before turning toward her. "There is something I have wanted to tell you for a long time," he said. Olivia listened attentively, uncertain where the conversation was heading. Ethan smiled softly. "The truth is, our story did not begin tonight. It began on a rainy afternoon when you found a black leather bag in a park. Olivia froze. The memory returned instantly. The rain, the bench, the money, the police station. Before she could respond, Ethan continued. I was there. I saw everything. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Olivia stared at him in complete disbelief. After all these months, she was finally about to learn how one decision made on a rainy afternoon had quietly changed the course of her entire life. Olivia Carter sat silently for several seconds, trying to process what Ethan Walker had just revealed. The conference room overlooking the city suddenly felt smaller as memories from that rainy afternoon returned in vivid detail. She remembered finding the black leather bag. She remembered opening it and seeing stacks of cash. She remembered the temptation, the uncertainty, and finally the decision to carry it to the police station. What she did not remember was seeing Ethan anywhere nearby. You were there? She finally asked. Ethan nodded. I was parked across the street. At first I simply noticed you sitting on the bench. Then I saw your reaction when you opened the bag. Olivia shook her head in disbelief. I had no idea anyone was watching. Ethan smiled gently. That is exactly why I never forgot it. He explained how he had watched her walk directly to the police station despite circumstances that clearly suggested she could have used the money herself. He described seeing her grocery shopping afterward, carefully counting every dollar. He described noticing the apartment above the bakery and watching Mason run into her arms when she arrived home. As Ethan spoke, Olivia listened with a mixture of surprise and emotion. For months, she had believed every positive change in her life resulted from coincidence, timing, and hard work. Now she was learning that one unexpected observer had quietly followed her journey from the very beginning. Ethan continued, What impressed me was not that you returned the money. It was what happened afterward. Every time I learned something about you, it confirmed the same thing. You were the same person whether someone was watching or not. Olivia looked down for a moment. Hearing those words affected her more deeply than she expected. Throughout her life, she had rarely received recognition for doing the right thing. Most responsibilities simply needed to be handled. Bills needed to be paid. Mason needed support. Work needed to be completed. Character often went unnoticed because it was expressed through ordinary actions. Ethan then revealed how he had arranged for her name to be considered when Brooks Community Outreach began searching for candidates. You earned the position yourself, he said firmly. The interview panel made their own decision. The managers made their own evaluations. Nothing was handed to you. I simply opened a door because I believed you deserved the chance to walk through it. Relief immediately appeared on Olivia's face. That distinction mattered deeply to her. She wanted every achievement to be genuine. Ethan seemed to understand. Everything that happened after the introduction belongs entirely to you, he said. You proved yourself every step of the way. For several minutes, they continued talking about leadership, integrity, and opportunity. The conversation felt remarkably comfortable despite the unusual circumstances. By the time they returned to the main event, Olivia viewed the past year through an entirely different lens. Later that evening, she returned home and shared the story with Mason. His eyes grew wider with every detail. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment before smiling. So the reason everything changed was because you did the right thing? Olivia considered the question carefully. Then she shook her head. No, everything changed because I tried to do the right thing long before that day. Mason thought about her answer and nodded. As Olivia looked around the apartment that had witnessed both her struggles and her growth, she realized Ethan had discovered something important months ago. The $50,000 never changed her life. The values that guided her decision did. And the greatest reward was not the opportunity she received. It was knowing that character still mattered in a world where so many people believed otherwise. Nearly a year after the rainy afternoon that changed everything, Olivia Carter found herself standing in a place she had not visited since that unforgettable day. The small city park looked different now. The trees were full of green leaves. Children played nearby. Sunlight reflected across the walking paths where rainwater had once gathered in shallow puddles. Yet despite the changes, Olivia immediately recognized the bench. It was the same bench where she had discovered the black leather bag. The same bench where she had faced a decision that tested every value she believed in. Beside her stood Mason, now a little taller and noticeably more confident than he had been a year earlier. He looked around curiously while holding a small notebook filled with ideas for a school essay. His assignment was simple. Students had been asked to write about a person who inspired them. Olivia already knew whose name would appear on the first page. A few moments later, Ethan Walker arrived and joined them. Over the past several months, a genuine friendship had developed between him, Olivia, and Mason. What began as admiration had grown into mutual respect. Ethan often visited community projects. Mason enjoyed sharing stories about school. Olivia appreciated having someone in her life who understood the importance of integrity rather than simply talking about it. Together, they walked slowly through the park. Eventually, they reached the bench and stopped. Ethan glanced toward it and smiled. "It is strange how one ordinary place can hold such an important memory," he said. Olivia nodded. "At the time, it felt like the hardest decision I had ever faced." Mason looked surprised. "Even harder than changing jobs?" Olivia laughed softly. "Much harder, because nobody would have known if I made the wrong choice." Ethan looked toward the skyline visible beyond the trees. "That is exactly why it mattered." For several minutes, they sat quietly and reflected on everything that had happened. The outreach organization continued thriving. Olivia had recently been promoted to oversee several community programs. Families trusted her leadership. Employees respected her judgment. More importantly, she felt fulfilled. She was helping people in ways she had always hoped to. Meanwhile, Mason was excelling in school and talking excitedly about future goals that once felt impossible. The constant fear and uncertainty that had once followed them every day no longer controlled their lives. As the afternoon sunlight began to soften, Mason opened his notebook and asked a question. "What do you think is the most important thing that happened because of that day?" Ethan smiled thoughtfully. Olivia considered the question for a moment before answering. "The most important thing was not finding the money. It was learning that doing the right thing still matters, even when nobody is watching." Mason carefully wrote down her words. Ethan nodded in agreement. The answer seemed simple, yet all three understood how much truth it contained. Eventually they stood and prepared to leave. Before walking away, Olivia glanced back at the bench one final time. A year earlier, she had arrived there carrying worry, exhaustion, and uncertainty about the future. Today she left carrying something very different. Confidence, purpose, gratitude. The road ahead would still contain challenges because every life does. But she no longer feared them. As they walked toward the parking lot together, Olivia realized that the greatest reward had never been an opportunity, a promotion, or recognition. The greatest reward was becoming the kind of person who could face any circumstance and still choose what was right. And that was something no amount of money could ever buy.